Have you ever felt so betrayed, so fundamentally disrespected, that something inside you just snapped? Not into rage, but into this chilling, absolute clarity? Because that's exactly what happened the day my pregnant wife, carrying another man's child, sat her entitled ass in my mother's chair while her entire family told me to leave my own home. I didn't argue, not a single word. I just watched their faces drain of color when I finally spoke. Their apologies, their sudden change of tune. It was way too late. Picture this. I walked into my own living room. Not just a living room, but my living room, the one I'd grown up in, the one my mother built. And there she was, Camille, my wife, 29 years old, 7 months pregnant, with a baby that absolutely wasn't mine. She was sitting in my mother's chair. Not just some random armchair, but the high-backed ivory armchair my mother had reupholstered 3 times in 28 years. The one with the faint coffee ring on the right armrest from the morning she died a ring. I'd never cleaned because it felt like the last thing her hands had ever touched. And Camille sat there, acting like the wronged woman, one hand resting on her belly, the other tracing the embroidered edge of that armrest like she was already pricing it for sale. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, and counted 6 people who had no right to be there. 6 people who had let themselves in with the spare key I kept by the door. 6 people who had helped themselves to my good coffee. And a thought, cold and clear, hit me. They have no idea what they just walked into. I actually smiled. Not a happy smile, more like the smile of a poker player holding a royal flush, sitting perfectly still, waiting. Let me back up a bit because you need to understand what this house means to me before you can truly grasp what happened that evening. My name is Enrique Salvador del Rosario. I'm 34, a forensic accountant, which is a fancy way of saying my job is to find the money people hide and prove they hid it. This house? It's not just bricks and mortar. It's my mother, Corazon del Rosario. She built this place in Quezon City with 13 years of savings from working as a nurse in Riyadh. She came home with swollen feet, a ruined back, and one single burning dream that her son would never, ever have to ask another human being for a roof over his head. My mother wasn't sentimental. She was practical, like only women who've survived hard things can be. Efficient, unsentimental, and always 3 steps ahead. When I told her I was marrying Camille, she said 2 things. First, she has a soft face. Watch women with soft faces. Second, this house stays in your name, only your name. I thought she was being dramatic, but I signed the deed of donation anyway. You didn't argue with Corazon del Rosario about property law. It was as productive as arguing with a load-bearing wall. She died 16 months after the wedding. Liver cancer, caught late. I held her hand at 30:40 a.m. on a Tuesday, and she whispered, "The house, Enrique, don't be soft." I wasn't soft, but Camille was. I saw it early and, God help me, I called it gentleness, her easy warmth, her inability to sit through a hard conversation, her habit of retreating the moment things got heavy. I told myself these were manageable quirks. I told myself I was steady enough for both of us. For 5 years, I funded her dreams, the coffee shop that lasted 9 months, the clothing label that bled money, the events company that mostly meant lavish lunches charged to our joint account. I wasn't blind. I was just invested. Sunk cost fallacy, wearing the face of love. Her family loved that about me. Loved is the wrong word. They relied on it. I was the son-in-law who paid on time, never raised his voice, fixed things, and asked for nothing in return. Her father, Ernesto, would introduce me as our accountant, and everyone would laugh. I laughed too, not yet realizing it wasn't a joke. It was my job description. I started noticing the small things. The new cologne scent on her clothes. The way she started sleeping deliberately on her side of the bed, building an invisible wall. Her phone, always face down. A friend mentioned her wellness weekend in Tagate. Actually happened the month before, Camille said. The phone suddenly had a passcode after 5 years of marriage. The gym bag coming home, packed exactly as she'd left it. Each time I told myself a story. She's tired. She needs space. It's the business. I was so busy being reasonable that I almost missed the whole thing. The first crack I couldn't paper over happened on a Wednesday in September. I came home early, 3:30 in the afternoon, because our office lost power. I remember the light that day, honey-colored and thick, making everything look more peaceful than it was. On the kitchen counter, I found it. Not hidden, just sitting there, lazy and careless. A receipt. Hotel Seda BGC, September 8th. Deluxe room, 2 nights. Room service dinner for 2. Breakfast for 2. Camille had told me she was at a women's wellness retreat from the 7th to the 9th. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I'd imagined this moment so many times. The shouting, the breaking things. Instead, I took a photo of the receipt with my phone, put it back exactly where I found it, and went to our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I thought about my mother. Then I thought about lawyers. Those 2 hours were calm, not inside. Inside, I was a house on fire, being photographed by a very steady man. And that steady man kept taking pictures. Somewhere in the second hour, I stopped grieving the marriage and started counting what I could prove. And that counting was the only thing that kept me on that bed instead of driving to whatever hotel she was at. This is where most people make the mistake, moving too fast, too loud. I didn't confront Camille. A confronted spouse becomes a defensive spouse, and a defensive spouse destroys evidence. The next morning, I called attorney Magros Yulo. My mother had made me save her number under insurance 2 weeks before the wedding. That's a terrible thing to say to your son before his wedding, I'd said. Put it in your phone, Enrique, she'd replied. So I did. Attorney Yulo's office was on the 12th floor. She was in her 50s, gray hair and a neat bun, with eyes that had seen every version of every story and were still paying attention. Her first question after I laid everything out wasn't, "Are you sure?" or "Have you talked to her?" It was, "Is the house in your name?" "Yes," I said. "Sole exclusive property deed of donation from my mother 2 years before the marriage. Never commingled." She allowed herself the smallest smile. "Good. Your mother was a wise woman." She was. "Enrique," she said, setting down her pen, "the urge you are about to feel is to make her understand how badly she hurt you. Resist it. That single urge has lost more houses and more custody than any lawyer in this city ever has. We are not going to make her understand anything. We are going to make her sign." I nodded. I'd already decided that sitting on the bed, but it helped to hear a professional say it, like a doctor finally naming the thing you felt growing inside you. What we did over the next 6 weeks was build a case, methodically, quietly. Attorney Yulo connected me with a private investigator, Rodel Cabrera, retired NBI. He spoke with the unhurried calm of a man who'd seen everything. He charged a flat fee, paid from a personal account Camille didn't know existed. An account I'd opened years ago, a quiet internal alarm I'd never fully heard. Cabrera delivered his report on a Thursday. Hotel receipts, 6 separate stays over 4 months. 214 text messages, screenshots from a source, and photographs. "This is the part you'll want to brace for," he said. "Tell me she's pregnant," I said. 7 months. I stared at the envelope in my hands. 7 months. I counted backward. She would have known for months, and she'd gone on sleeping beside me, letting me press my hand to the small of her back at night, calling it stress, letting me manage our money, letting me be her husband, knowing my coffee went cold on the table. Cabrera watched me, gauging my reaction. I wasn't about to do anything stupid. I asked him 3 questions. Was he certain of the timeline? Yes. Did the source know he was hired? No. Would any of this hold up in court? He slid a second, thinner envelope across the table. "Chain of custody documentation," he said. "I don't do the other kind of work." That's when I understood why Attorney Yulo chose him, like my mother choosing a contractor. Would the foundation still be standing in 30 years? I did not cry in front of Rodel Cabrera. I waited until I was in my car, alone in the dark. I cried for 9 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. And when the 9 minutes were up, I started making calls. The second thing I did alone. I opened the family's books. Not just Camille's, but her parents'. I'm a forensic accountant. Finding the money under the story people tell about themselves is my profession. And when I sat down to trace it, I found the story I'd been telling myself for years had a foundation I had personally poured. For 4 years, I had been quietly servicing the housing loan on the Alcaraz family home in Antipolo. Ernesto's hauling business, his pride and joy, ran on a credit line I had co-signed, and twice personally topped up when the banks lost their nerve. I had never once called any of it leverage. I had called it family. Now, I sat with the statements laid out across my dining table like a hand of cards. And for the first time, I understood exactly what I had been holding all along. I printed everything. 4 years of amortization, every payment from my account. The 2 times I wired money to keep Ernesto's trucks on the road wrapped in the soft language of family. The tuition I'd quietly covered for Ivy's eldest when Marlon was between jobs. None of it felt like a ledger while I was living inside it. But under the dining room light, squared off at the edges, it read like one thing. The only document that would matter on Tuesday. I found out about the intervention, the way you find out about weather that's already on top of you. A phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. It was Sunday. Camille was in the garden, on the phone. I was in the kitchen, window open above the sink. She must have forgotten the window. Or maybe she'd just stopped being careful around me. I heard her say, "Yes, Ma, Tuesday at 7 he'll be home." And then, "No, I don't want it ugly. I just want it done. Bring Papa. Bring Ivy. Gabriel should come too. He has a right to be there. He needs to see this is real. So Enrique understands it's real." She hung up. I stood at the sink, my hands under the running cold water. Tuesday. They were planning an ambush, coming to my house, with their lover in tow, to perform some theatrical confrontation designed to overwhelm me into simply stepping aside. Perla Alcaraz, Camille's mother, a woman who had never in 60 years admitted a mistake, had apparently decided the most efficient way to solve her daughter's infidelity was to make the husband quietly disappear. I had 3 days. I used them well. I called Attorney Yulo Monday morning. She spent 40 minutes laying out exactly what I could and could not say, what counted as a legal threat versus protected speech, and how the penal provisions of the family code applied to what Camille and Gabriel had done. Adultery, she said. Article 333 of the revised penal code. Criminal, not merely civil. The married woman who takes a lover, and the paramour who knowingly takes one of her, and the paramour who knowingly takes up with a married woman, can both be prosecuted. Both can serve prison time. The evidence Cabrera gathered is admissible. The hotel receipts, the messages, the photographs, that is Exhibit A through D right there. And the house is exclusive property, documented and uncontested. They cannot legally compel you to vacate. If they try to physically remove you, that's unlawful eviction stacked on top of everything else. She paused. Enrique, if they come to your home Tuesday intending what it sounds like they intend, you hold every card. Every card. That was the phrase I carried into Tuesday. I want to describe what it was like watching them file in. Perla first, small, sharp-eyed, wearing the expression she always wore when she'd already decided she was right about something, which was always. Then, Ernesto, my father-in-law, a heavy-set man who communicated primarily in grunts. He had never, in 5 years, asked me a single question about my life. Then Ivy, Camille's older sister, who had the family's soft face, and twice its talent for moral convenience, and her husband Marlon, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. And then finally, Camille, with Gabriel at her side. Gabriel. He was younger than I'd expected from the photographs, handsome in the untested way of men who haven't had anything truly go wrong for them. He walked into my house with his hand at the small of my wife's back, his eyes moving slowly around the room like he was taking inventory. Camille crossed directly to my mother's chair and lowered herself into it. I watched her settle, and that was the moment. Not the receipt, not Cabrera's report, not even the Sunday phone call. That was the moment I felt something cold and clear move through me. Not rage, something cleaner. Something that felt like absolute, crystal certainty. I had set out coffee. I want you to understand. Before they arrived, I'd brewed a fresh pot, arranged the cups, put out a small plate of biscuits. Not out of hospitality. I needed them seated, comfortable, invested in their performance. I needed them to believe they were in control. I sat in a plain wooden armchair across from them, not my mother's. I watched them arrange themselves into their unified front, their family tribunal, and then I waited. Perla set her cup down with a deliberate little clink that was both delicate and authoritative, the sound of a woman who has practiced it. "Enrique," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "What's done is done. We are all adults here. Camille is carrying a child. That is a blessing. Whatever the circumstances, a child needs a stable home. This home. You are a man. You are young. You can begin again anywhere. Be reasonable and step aside so everyone can move forward in peace." She had not asked how I was. She would not. "You've been good to this family," she went on, her tone condescending, "and we are grateful. But you have to understand the situation. I understand the situation perfectly, I said pleasantly. A brief silence. She pressed on. Good, then you understand that Camille and the baby need. I wasn't finished, I interrupted. Perla blinked, but Ivy jumped in before the silence could settle. Enrique, look, you don't have children. Camille does now. That's just life. If you agree to an uncontested divorce and sign the house over, you both walk away clean. No ugliness. No ugliness, I repeated. Yes, exactly. You brought your daughter and the man she is 7 months pregnant by into my house to pressure me out of it, I said. And you're asking me to help you avoid ugliness? Ivy opened her mouth, then closed it. Ernesto cleared his throat. We have to think about the child. Camille needs a stable home. This home. It would be best if you found somewhere else to stay by the end of the month, Perla added, her voice firm. By the end of the month? I said softly. Yes. You're not asking me for a divorce, I said. You're asking me to vacate the premises. It's just practical, Ivy interjected. It's eviction, I said. You're trying to evict me from my own property to install your daughter and her boyfriend. Perla's voice sharpened. Don't be dramatic, Enrique. Nobody is evicting anybody. We are asking you to do the decent thing, the generous thing, the thing a real man does when a marriage is over, which is to walk out with his head high and not make a war out of one woman's mistake. I looked at her for a moment. A war? I said. You let yourselves into my living room with 6 people and the man my wife is carrying a child for, and the thing you're worried about is whether I might make a war. She had the grace, or maybe just the reflex, to look away. Camille shifted in my mother's chair, pressing a hand to her belly, casting her eyes down in a performance of wounded innocence that might have worked on a less well-researched audience. I never wanted to hurt you, Enrique, she said quietly. I truly didn't. But Gabriel and I love each other. Every child deserves a father and a stable home. She let her eyes travel slowly around the room. The high ceilings, the narrow floorboards my mother had chosen one by one, the capiz shell lamp, the wall of books. She was already redecorating in her head. I felt the royal flush settle into my hands. I stood up. Not dramatically. Not in a rush. I stood the way my mother used to stand right before she said the thing that ended an argument, with the unhurried calm of someone who has already won and is simply getting to her feet to collect. I walked to the side table and poured myself a glass of water. The condensation was cold against my fingertips. I drank 2 measured sips and set it down. I turned to face them. If you're finished, I said, my voice level, then it's my turn. The room went completely quiet. They had expected a man to shout, to throw something, to do something messy and loud that could be filed away later as a temper, a man out of control, easy to dismiss. They were not expecting my voice to be level, my hands to be still. They were not expecting ice. You are operating under several serious misconceptions, I said. I'd like to correct them. Camille stared at me. So did Gabriel. First, I said, looking at Perla, Ernesto, and Ivy with her hand on Marlon's arm. This house is registered exclusively in my name. Enrique Salvador del Rosario. It came to me by deed of donation from my mother 2 years before I ever met Camille. Exclusive property, excluded from our conjugal assets by law and by document. Camille's name has never appeared on the title. It never will. I let that sit for 5 full seconds. Which means you cannot compel me to leave. You have no legal standing in this house whatsoever. You are guests. Uninvited guests who, I'll note, let yourselves in with a key that belongs to a woman who does not own a single tile she's standing on. Perla's jaw tightened. Enrique, we know you're hurting. I'm not hurting, Perla. I'm clarifying. I took 1 step forward. Second, you came here to discuss a peaceful divorce. Let me tell you what a peaceful divorce would actually cost this family. Ernesto's face was beginning to redden. Now, just a minute. Adultery, I said. Article 333 of the Revised Penal Code. A criminal offense. The married woman who takes a lover and the man who knowingly takes up with her. I turned to Gabriel. Both can be prosecuted. Both can serve prison time. Gabriel had gone very still. I have Rodel Cabrera's full report, I continued. Mr. Bob Cabrera is a former NBI investigator with 21 years of service who spent 3 weeks documenting this. I have hotel receipts from 6 separate stays, 214 text messages, and photographs. My attorney, Magras Yulo, has had all of it since last week. It's organized into Exhibits A through D. And you, Gabriel, you teach at a public elementary school. You know exactly what an administrative case for immorality does to a license. An adultery finding is not a rumor a principal gets to ignore. Gabriel was on his feet. Enrique, please, can we just— You're in my house, Gabriel, I said quietly. Sit down. He sat. I've never in my life felt the sensation of telling a man to sit and having him do it instantly, without a word of argument. It wasn't satisfying in the way I'd imagined power would be. It was just accurate. Like a calibration. Camille hadn't said a word since I stood up. She sat very still in the ivory chair. I noticed she had finally stopped performing. The wounded eyes were gone. What was left was just a woman doing arithmetic in her head, and I could see, even from across the room, that the numbers were not landing where she'd been promised they would. Third, I said, turning back to Perla and Ernesto, I am a forensic accountant. Finding money that people have carefully hidden is not a hobby for me. It is my entire profession. So, before you came to my house to take it from me, I did the natural thing. I opened yours. For 4 years, I have personally serviced the housing loan on your home in Antipolo. Ernesto, your hauling business runs on a credit line. I co-signed a line I have twice paid down myself when the bank was ready to pull it. Your names are on those titles. My money is on the amortization. Every single peso is documented, because I am the one who documented it. And the moment I stop, both of those doors close. The arithmetic of the room changed right in front of me. I watched it happen. I watched Perla go from steel to scramble in about 4 seconds. She rose so fast her cup rattled in its saucer. Diosco, she was already crossing the room toward me, arms opening, her face already reassembling itself into warmth. Why didn't you say something? This changes everything. We're family. You know we love you. You didn't love me 11 minutes ago, I said pleasantly, taking a small step back. She stopped. 11 minutes ago, you wanted me gone by the end of the month. The arithmetic changed for you, that's all. Now sit down. She sat. But I haven't finished, I said. The scramble in the room froze. I turned to Camille, still sunk into my mother's chair, both hands on her belly. One more thing, I said. This one is only for you. Cabrera didn't only watch you. He watched Gabriel too. And you are not the only address that man keeps. What happened next was not a reaction so much as a detonation. Camille made a sound, small and airless, like something deflating. Her eyes went to Gabriel and stayed there, searching his face for a denial that arrived a half-second too slow to matter. Gabriel's mouth opened. You, he started. That's not Camille, that's not. But she wasn't listening to him anymore. She was doing the math that guilt makes a person do. I want to be honest with you now. In a way, I wasn't honest in that room. That was a lie. Rodel Cabrera never followed Gabriel. I had no report on him, no photographs, no second address, nothing at all. It was a complete and deliberate bluff. But guilt is an extraordinary mirror. When you have spent the better part of a year deceiving the person who loved you, an accusation does not land like a question. It lands like a confession you already wrote and forgot you were carrying. Camille had lied to me in this house for 8 months. She had every reason on earth to believe she was being lied to in return, because she knew, better than anyone alive, exactly how easy it had been to do. Her guilt made it true before I finished the sentence. Her face made it true. That was the point. She slumped back into the ivory chair. Ernesto said something low that sounded like a curse. Ivy had a hand pressed over her mouth. Marlon had the expression of a man who very much wished he had stayed home. I walked to the front door. I opened it. The October evening air in Quezon City, cooler than usual, came in, carrying the faint smell of rain. I held the door open and turned back to the room. I've already filed the preliminary paperwork with Attorney Yulo, I said. This house is legally mine. That is documented and it is not open for discussion. Technically, every one of you is trespassing, because Camille's right to be in this house ended with the marriage I am in the process of dissolving. I checked my watch. A round-faced Seiko my mother left me. You have 5 minutes. If you're not gone by then, I call the police. And Gabriel, if I hear of any further contact from you regarding this house or my life, my attorney files a civil suit for damages on top of everything else. Nobody moved for a moment. They were looking at me the way people look at a weather phenomenon, something they had not factored into their plans, something outside the range of what they'd come prepared for. 1 minute gone, I said. Perla moved first. She gathered herself with the strained dignity of a woman who has never once admitted defeat and has therefore built elaborate private fictions to explain every loss she's ever taken. She did not look at me as she passed. Ernesto followed, heavy-footed and silent. Ivy pulled Marlon by the sleeve, and they left without a word. Gabriel went next, no longer looking like a man who had won anything at all. Camille was last. She rose slowly from the ivory armchair and stood there a moment, one hand still on her belly. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read and didn't try to. "Enrique," she said, barely above a whisper, "is it true about Gabriel?" "Goodbye, Camille," I said. She stood there another second. Then she walked out. I closed the door. The lock clicked. That sound clean, definitive. A small, mechanical fact that went all the way through me. I stood alone in my house for a while. In my mother's house. Then I walked back to the living room and stood in front of the ivory armchair. I smoothed the embroidered edge with my fingertips, the same edge my wife had been tracing like she was already pricing it. I stood there until the room felt like mine again. It did not take long. My mother told me not to be soft. For 5 years I mistook softness for love. That night, I mistook nothing. I stood in the house she'd built with her hands, her absence, and her will, and I decided, finally and completely, what I was keeping. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had a moment where you realized your softness was just enabling someone else's disrespect? Tell me what you think in the comments. I really want to know.